And they really help us with a few different things. One is also on engagement, so making sure we have the ability to really be out there in the community. As many of you know, we've been at a lot of events just in the last few weeks, and it'll really extend our reach to be able to have more folks help us get out in the community as they come on board. And the second important piece of that is helping with more of the technical analysis. So having expertise in transportation, housing, economic development, all those topic pieces that we'll be diving into. The consultant team helps us with that analysis and that expertise as we start to talk about recommendations. So we're excited that they're finally just about to be on board with us, and we invited them to the meeting tonight to introduce themselves and also to help with our breakout group discussions that we're going to have later. So with that, I'm just throw it over to Brad Siegel. You wanted to introduce the team, and this will just be a brief introduction for now, and then you'll see more of the team members as we go along through the process.
Thanks, Liz, and good evening, everyone. I'm Brad Siegel. I am founder president of PUMA, Progressive Urban Management Associates. We're a community development firm that's based in Denver on East Colfax, but we also have national reach. Over the last 30 years, we've worked in 250 cities and 38 states. I'm a Denver native. I grew up on the east side. I'm a graduate of Manual High School. I'm very proud of that. I've spent much of the last 35 years being involved either directly or on the periphery of the evolution of the city. And on this project, I'll be managing the economics and housing portion of the analysis. So how we retain small businesses, how we create affordable housing, those types of issues. Since everyone's screen is different, I'll just call out folks on the team, and I'll start with our project manager, who is Cheney Bostic.
Hi everyone, Cheney Bostic with my firm Studio Seed. I'm a land use and urban design consultant and have worked on various neighborhood planning projects of this scale and same.
Oops, Cheney's also based in Golden. So
yeah, we lost her for a second.
Maybe they're not, they don't have internet tonight. Next is Amanda Kennard. Oh, Cheney, you're back with us. Do you want to finish your introduction, or you froze up?
Okay, not sure where I froze up, but I will be assisting project management role with Liz. I hope to get to know each and every one of you throughout this process. I'm also leading the land use and built form. My background is in architecture. I've lived in the Denver area for 15 years. Not sure.
Amanda?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Kennard. I am part of the team at PUMA. My role on this project will be Deputy Project Manager. So working closely with the entire consultant team and with the city folks throughout this process. And I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Erin, you're up next.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Lutz, and I'm also part of the PUMA team. I've been working with PUMA for the last 8+ years. My background is actually originally in communications, although then I discovered the world of planning and have a degree in urban planning as well. And my role on this project will be supporting the outreach components and sort of helping to coordinate all of the different facets of outreach that we'll have going on simultaneously throughout this effort. And I'm also largely a Denver native and went to East High School, for those of you who care. Thanks.
Jasmine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Bojorquez. I grew up on the west side of Denver. I currently live in Ave Park. My background is in public policy related to the social safety net. I've also done a lot of on-the-ground work with unhoused populations and a lot of women and a lot of translation for Colorado Legal Services. So all the folks that intersect there. On this project, I will be doing a lot with community outreach and translation, and yeah.
Great. And the last member of our team that's on the screen tonight is Ben Kelly.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ben Kelly, and my role in this project is to support Erin in the communications and engagement and outreach. team, and I worked previously on the Neighborhood Planning Initiative project in the East Colfax corridor. And I was born and raised in Denver, and very excited to get immersed in near Northwest Denver. Thanks.
Great. Thanks to everybody. Like I mentioned, there's also team members who help with the technical analysis, so they'll probably come in at certain points during our discussion as we dive into specific topics. But we're excited to have them on board and start to expand our reach and our work on the plan. So with that, I'm going to pull up the agenda now. Oh, and Naomi, if you wanted to introduce yourself, I saw you pop on the screen.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was in limbo. I'm Naomi. I am another one of the aides for Councilwoman Sandoval, and I focus on planning. So I'm very excited to listen in and participate in this.
Great, thanks, Naomi. Can everybody see the screen now? Okay, great. So we're at meeting number 3. Yay, 3 and 2 down. Just a few more to go. So what we wanted to touch base on tonight, the main bulk of our discussion will be about the engagement strategy. So I sent that out to all of you. I hope you've had some time to take a look at it. I'll give you a reminder of what's in it. And then we want to break out into groups. Our idea was to break out by neighborhood. Hopefully we've got enough people from each neighborhood to talk through the engagement piece. Just your ideas around some of the goals in that plan and how we go about engagement, so that we're all starting from a good place as we move forward. And we'll want to come back together and have that discussion as well. And we'll have a short break for everybody, and feel free to take a break at any other point if you need to. That's the beauty of Zoom. You can turn off your camera for a moment if you need to. But we're also saving time at the end of the agenda to what we'd like to do kind of in the next few meetings is give a little time to our colleagues in other departments to talk about some of their citywide or planning efforts that are ongoing and projects in the area. So to kind of build our understanding of planning guidance that we have in place and just projects that we should be coordinating with as we move forward. So we'll save time for that at the end of the meeting. Just some reminders for everybody, if you're talking, try to remember to turn on your video and use mute when you're not speaking. Send us a chat if you're having any technical issues. The meeting is primarily between steering committee members, but if you're a member of the public joining, you're more than welcome to sit in on the meeting. And if you have a question, you can feel free to put that in the chat, and we'll try to get to that at the end if we have time, or we'll reach out to you afterwards. And just a reminder that we are recording this, and we'll post it on our website afterwards. These are some of the ground rules we talked about at our first meeting, and just a reminder for all of you that we want to make sure we're making room for everybody to speak during this meeting. If you've spoken already, make sure you give a chance to someone else to chime in, just particularly when you're in your breakout groups. Try to save time by not repeating necessarily everything that someone else has said. And if you're disagreeing, and that's probably not coming up as much just yet until we dive more into topics, but remember to be respectful and focus on the idea. Okay, so I'm gonna just go over some reminders of what's in the engagement strategy, and I'll save a little bit of time too if there's any general questions before we break out into groups. And before that, I wanted to go through just what we've done so far in terms of our community kickoff and engagement. We've been trying to go to events throughout the community in the last few weeks since we had the virtual kickoff. So we've been to a few barbecues, jazz in the park, movies in the park. We've connected with Quig Newton, the Denver Housing Authority property in Sunnyside. And we've done some work with youth engagement. And I think all of you who've helped connect us to these events and hosted them, particularly Councilwoman Sandoval and the Sunnyside Neighborhood Organization. So and if Renee's on here too, she has helped us quite a bit with Denver Housing Authority. So thank you for that. So far, and we anticipate that we'll have, I just see that my poster is slipped backwards here, so forgive me for that. That image there. That's not the way people had to fill it out, but we had, we anticipate that we'll have the survey open through September, but we wanted to just give you a snapshot of where we are right now in terms of who's filled it out and who we've been seeing at community events. And I think this would be particularly helpful as we start to think about that engagement strategy and what we should be doing going forward and how we reach groups that we aren't necessarily reaching just yet. So as of right now, about 240 people have completed the online survey. And that's just a screenshot there of the map where people are putting pins for things that they like or don't like or have ideas about. And we've interacted with about 175 people either at the kickoff or at the community events that we've been to. And we've been taking the analog version of the map and asking people similar questions about what they like or don't like or worried about in their neighborhoods. So as of right now, we have about 1,000 map comments to go through. And I think part of our September meeting, we'll be starting to share with you some of the themes that we're hearing from the various comments that we're hearing from community members. And we also do have work, I think we mentioned this in an early meeting, we had some partnerships with Denver Montessori in particular, that high school, where they did some community engagement on their own about with students, and we'll bring in that input as well as we look at those themes. And these are just some of the events that we have tentatively scheduled for now. We are going back to Quig Newton this Thursday to do an event with residents there. And then we have some back to school nights, some additional festivals and events. And we're also working towards a basketball tournament at Aslan Recreation Center, and Councilwoman Sandoval is helping with us with that as well. We think that will be a very fun event. We're working on interviews. So if there's key people you see that we should reach out to and meet with, these are some dates that we have scheduled, but we're in general wanting to talk with community stakeholders. So if you have ideas, you can share those with us. And then starting to build out more of that engagement. One thing we want to talk about in our breakout groups is the idea of tours. And I will just pause here for a minute to touch on, I believe you all saw my email, and that we have a public health order that the mayor has issued in Denver that is requiring COVID-19 vaccines. And it does apply to volunteers in addition to employees, but it's only to the extent that we meet in person. So, this type of virtual meeting does not require that you demonstrate that you've had the vaccine. But we do need to think about this as we decide whether we're meeting in person. And what we're thinking right now is that the idea of a tour would be something more optional. So you could choose if you'd like to do that or not. But we do want to get your thoughts on whether you would like to still meet in person. And I'll follow up with an email after this meeting on that, because originally we had talked about alternating between in-person and virtual. So there will be more details that I can share with you just about how you would demonstrate that you have your vaccine. But I'd just like to kind of get your temperature, and we can do that anonymously, on whether you feel comfortable meeting in person given kind of the current state of things. But we do want to talk in our small groups just about the idea of tours, and again, making those more of an optional way for folks to get together if they feel comfortable doing so. So any questions on that before I just quickly go into some additional summary of who we've heard from so far? Everybody good? I can't fully see the chat, so. Okay, I'll keep going. And you can ask questions later too as well. So we've done, and so I would take this as a snapshot. What we've done is taken some of the demographic information that we received in the kickoff survey and in the virtual meeting that we had. If you remember, there were some demographic questions integrated into that. And we've taken those stats and compared them with what we know to be the demographics of our area. And this, again, is just a picture in time. It doesn't capture all of our in-person events, but helps us think about where we need to work on reaching community members. So you'll see on the left here is the demographics that we have from the virtual kickoff and from the survey. And then on the right is our population. So you'll see that both Sunnyside and Highland, over 100 folks have participated in those two pieces, but we're low on Chaffee Park and Jefferson Park. They do have lower populations, but we do want to make sure that we get more folks involved from those groups. So get your ideas stirring about that. You'll see this other column here. I will say, just from glancing through what folks said, there's a lot of people who mentioned that they lived just west of Federal. So maybe some of the neighborhoods that were, Berkeley, West Highland, those types of things I was seeing in the comments when people shared where they lived if they weren't in the neighborhood. So again, on the left is the input from the virtual survey and the kickoff, and the right is demographics, and this is tenure. So whether someone rents or owns, we're over, we have too much representation from owners, so we need to work on getting to renters. So only about 10% of folks who filled it out were renters, versus there's 56% of residents in near Northwest are renters. This one, sorry, is a little bit probably difficult to decipher, but at the bottom here are our demographics, and this is on race and ethnicity. So we have 50% people are identify as white, and this is when they take the census, but we have 72% of our participants are identifying as that in the survey, versus only 9% identify as Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish, and that's 35% of our population. So that's definitely an area that we need to improve on reaching those demographics. And this is something you probably saw in the engagement strategy of just, we want to do these checks of like, where are we hearing from people? What do we need to do to reach these other groups throughout this process? And the last one here is on income. So again, the left is our kickoff and survey, and the right is our demographics. And you'll see that, well, we have a lot of people who don't want to answer that question, just generally, that's that 20%. All these questions are optional for folks, but we're definitely still overrepresented. So you'll see those that make 200,000 or more are at 21%, versus that's only 11% of our population. We're closer on some of these numbers in the 25 to 100,000 range, but we have very low participation so far in the lower income brackets. Okay, so that's the background on that. Let me jump into the engagement strategy so you can start thinking about this for your breakout groups. And these are the slides we shared with you at the very first meeting before we sent you the engagement strategy. So keep in mind kind of what you just saw in terms of our demographics, and probably some of our thinking in the equity training as well, right? As we have these conversations. So our engagement strategy is really intended to kind of lay out our plan for working with the community throughout this process. It establishes goals and then the methods to achieve them, and commitment to tracking our progress throughout the process. And we really want to hear input from you and from the general public in this first phase as we kind of try to adapt that strategy in the way that works best for near Northwest residents. So the main goals that are outlined, and you've seen these, are really to make sure that we're engaging members who are representative of those demographics, so having that diversity of participation, that we're empowering marginalized or underrepresented communities, that we're building trust, and that we're educating participants, building their capacity to understand the planning process and kind of how the city works. And I won't go through these in detail, but the plan or the strategy outlines the groups that we know are traditionally underrepresented and talks about potential strategies to help reach them. So this is kind of where we're looking to you all to help us with, are we missing groups? Are there different strategies we should consider to reach out to these groups? And then thinking through whether there's any special considerations in the area. We have some listed here on this slide, we have, many neighborhood organizations in the area that are already working together. So how do we work with that group? How do we get in contact with businesses when there's not as many business organizations in many of the areas? And then how do we work with our religious organizations? But if there's others you can think of that are special considerations, that's one of our discussion questions. And the strategy outlines kind of the different types of tools. So we've already been using some of these to date, but these are the ones that we kind of have in our toolbox as we move forward through the process. And one I wanted to touch on, because this is a question for you all as well, is the idea of community navigators. So this might be a term that some of you are familiar with, but yeah, similar to kind of the role that you all play as steering committee members that are well connected in your community. The idea of a navigator is to really try to connect with those underrepresented groups and actually hire community members as an extension of the planning team. So it's, we're calculating it as about 40 to 80 hours, but it's maybe up to 10 hours a month throughout this process, particularly at key points when we want to get input, where we would have a community member help us reach out to particular groups. So those underrepresented groups that we're talking about, and they would reach out to them, get their input, and bring that back to the team, bring that back to the steering committee. And these might be folks that don't necessarily feel comfortable attending a big public meeting, or that we're just not hearing from or reaching directly through our other methods. So trying to find those people in the community that already have those connections, that are trusted, and can really kind of go out to their neighbors or their friends and talk to them about the planning process. And through this, we would kind of train them and help them with making those connection points. But as all of you are already well connected in your community, we'd love to hear from you all about people you think might be able to play this role, or organizations that we should talk through. So that's another question for your breakout groups. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and go into our groups, but there's 5 questions on here, and these are the ones that I sent you ahead of time. The first one's on the goals. So if you agree with the ones in the engagement strategy, if you would add to them, change them, would you add to or change the underrepresented groups? Or are there some that we're not thinking about? Clear ideas for reaching them? Are there any other special considerations we should think about? And talking through, like, is there something specifically you as a steering committee member could do to help with engagement? Are there 5 people that you could call and talk to, or an event that you could help us set up? And then are there specific people or groups that you think could serve that role as a navigator? And then lastly, what are the stops or topics that would be important to cover on a tour of your neighborhood? Okay, any just overall clarification questions before we break out into groups? We're going to try to do this by neighborhood, but Amanda, you can tell me if do we seem like we have enough people? Okay.
So we only had a couple folks from Chaffee Park, so we're going to combine that one with Sunnyside, but
okay.
Otherwise we're good. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Questions be
Any
in the
questions?
chat?
Sure.
Are the questions
Okay.
gonna be in the chat, or will someone like have them that's in each group?
They will be. So they'll be
Okay.
in each group. We'll have a kind of a Google Doc that we can take notes in, and we'll come back together to look at those, but we'll go through each question. Any other? So how many, Amanda, just quickly, how many people would be in the Sunnyside one? Does it look like the combined Sunnyside Chaffee Park?
So it looks like combined there are 14. There were only 2 steering committee folks from Chaffee Park. So there are also a couple folks on the phone who I wasn't sure, since we didn't get a chance to introduce them, but
see, let me hide this so I can see a little better. Stop sharing real quick.
Liz, it's Garrett. Can I
Yep.
make a suggestion?
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
in the Sunnyside group, but
Mhm.
I'm also a member of the Denver Elks Lodge, and I'm pretty active over there. And I office there, and I have some ideas about that. So maybe that might be a good, if Jefferson Park has less people
Yeah.
in it, might be a good place to switch me.
Okay, that sounds great. That's, I think Ashton was just asking about. So
We only have 3 folks in Jefferson Park though, too. So that's a smaller group as well.
well, we could combine Jefferson Park and Chaffee Park, but they're kind of far away from each other. And I don't know if you would want to, if you folks would want to do that, but how about we just do that? Is that okay if we combine those 2? So then we have 3 groups. And we can take some time to talk through the tour stops for both. Okay, so how about you, Aaron, and I can go to that one together.
Okay.
And
Great.
that
And
way
we're-
that Sunnyside one doesn't get too big.
And we're coming back together at 7:05. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
Perfect. All right. Well, if everyone is ready, I will go ahead and send you to the breakout rooms.
All right. This is our Island group. So just as a reminder, I'm Ella Stevie. I am one of the planners within CPD working on this project. And I am going to, let's see, I'm going to share my screen. We have just a Google Doc where we have the questions, we have a map, and we also, I'll just, as we go, I'll just live take notes in there. So we can step through the questions there. Yeah, let's just try to think. Do you guys all know each other? Okay, or the Highland crew. I know a lot of you are involved anyway. And then from the city, we also have Cortland Heiser. And Edson is literally just back from vacation. he at I think 5 p.m. So Edson, I'm very happy to have him join our group because he's been leading the community engagement strategy. So Edson, I'm gonna let you ease in. I will take notes and I can lead the discussion, but I'm very happy to have your expertise on and your historical knowledge on what's in that community engagement plan to speak to questions about that. And then, yeah, Naomi from Councilman Sandoval's office. And I'm going to just go ahead. I also have pulled up on this screen. I'm going to try and just share my screen because I also have pulled up the engagement plan that we were all sent, but we can reference that. And then just Google Maps so we can zoom in if we want to do that. So I think I just want to do my screen too. Actually, I'll do it this way. Okay. Are you guys seeing a Chrome window with Group 3 Highland in it? Great. All right. I can see some of you. Okay, well, let's just, so, first thing, we're already recording because I recorded the other one, so that's automatic. So we're set there. Let me make this a little bit bigger. The other thing that I want to do is assign, if one of you in this group could volunteer to report out to the larger group. I know we often assign that at the very end, but then I feel like whoever volunteers is kind of scrambling to remember all the pieces. So if we can figure out who would be willing to report to the group at the beginning, you'll have a little more time to collect your thoughts. So from the steering committee members, are any of you interested in doing that? And because I'm sharing, I can only see some of you. So if you wouldn't mind unmuting and chiming in. Any takers?
Man, I'll hop in. I can help out.
Great, thank you. Okay. I was about to have to start like quoting Ferris Bueller, so thank you for saving me from doing that. All right, so Tim Hernandez will report out for us. So let's just jump in with the questions. I'm struggling to make this bigger. The command is not working for me. So, oh, there we go. Okay. You think people in my generation are supposed to be good at computers, but I blame it on the fact that I grew up in Wyoming. I am definitely not. Okay, so we have our steering committee member who's volunteered. Thank you very much. So let's just start with the basics. Okay, although, sorry, I'm getting a notification from Zoom, but that Tim is gone, but it looks like you're still here. Starting with the basics, do you agree with the goals in the engagement strategy? Would you add to any of them? So I can go over to the engagement strategy and up to the goals so we can look at those here. These were also in the PowerPoint, which actually might be an easier place to read that. Are you guys?
Can you zoom? Can you zoom in? That way.
There we go. Is that readable now?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. So we have engaged community members who are represented of those who live, work, visit, and study in the plan area, empower historically marginalized, underrepresented, and hard to reach communities. Focus populations include, but are not limited to, youth, people of color, particularly Black, Brown, and Indigenous residents, non-native English speakers, people experiencing homelessness, lower income residents, people with disabilities, and renters. Goal 3 is to build trust between all participants by creating a space to listen and help heal old wounds. And goal 4 is educate participants on their role, the project, and the importance of a collaborative planning process. So those are the goals. Getting a thumbs up from Rebecca. And again, if you happen to be on my screen, so I might be missing some visual cues from others. So please don't. And also, because we're in this smaller group now, you guys don't all have to stay on mute. I think we're small enough that if we have a big, some background noise, we'll be able to figure out where that's coming from. So feel free to unmute and yeah, chime in. I can stay here, but as we get notes, I'll pop over to the notes and start putting that in there. So in addition to the nod from Rebecca, is there anything, Rebecca, that you particularly like about that really jumped out to you as something that you maybe hadn't thought of, but you're glad that's being included?
Well, I think goals 1 and 2 are really important, especially to making it as broad-based as possible.
Agreed.
So I'm going to put in a yes. Goal 1 and 2. Broad as possible. Okay. Other thoughts on this one? Should I assume that general silence means agreement here? Okay, Lorenzo, yes. I'm seeing your nod as well. Okay, well, this one's, I think, probably the goals, the high level stuff is often kind of the easiest part. The highest level has the most agreement. So let's jump into, does anyone, I just, from what Rebecca said, I said yes, but then particularly goal 1 and 2. Any other specifics to note here? Are we good to move on to the next question?
Let's move on. Yeah.
All right. Would you add or change the underrepresented groups listed in the engagement strategy? What are your, well, let's start with that one. So the specific groups listed, does that seem like the right list? Is there anyone missing? And I'll pop back over to here so we can look at this one. And actually, Edson, is this the right place to look, or is there a more detailed?
Yeah, why don't you go on to the actual, go down one page, I believe. So we broke it down here and just kind of add some notes. Like Tim, you had mentioned youth. So we included that as part of something, the unrepresentative stakeholders. But here we slowly have been building this with some of the stuff that you guys have mentioned and previously other steering committees with other groups as well, what they've said as well. And so we just also want to hear if there's other groups that you know of or are aware of that we should be targeting as well. And so
do we have other groups for whom English is not their first language in any of the 4 neighborhoods?
So we do have, specifically when it comes, we did break down in our language access section, which is just underneath this one, that we broke it down which percentage like do not speak English well, or English is a second language. And it's predominantly in like Jefferson Park and Chaffee Park when you start looking at the statistics. And so we're looking to bring translation services and interpretation when it comes to promotional materials and things of that nature. So we kind of broke that down, and I think that's one of the questions we're going to ask in a bit, I think, Ella, but right.
So Rebecca, to your original question.
And Tim has his hand up too.
Oh, okay, thank you. I can't see that. Rebecca, is there anything remaining on that, just to close the loop, because I'm our note taker. Sorry, Tim.
It's okay. So I'm just back in school, so I'm used to like actually raising my hand. But yeah, I would be curious if we could incorporate some type of language, especially considering vaccination status in our neighborhood and what that looks like. Like I think those without access to comprehensive health insurance, I think something like that could be good language to add in there as well, especially as we start to incorporate more moving processes of like who actually lives in our neighborhood and what their experiences are.
Yeah, not just, insurance, but also I think if I'm hearing where you're going, access to actual facilities, healthcare facilities.
100%, Rebecca, that's where I'm going.
Okay.
Yeah, the access to healthcare, aside from the pandemic and the COVID and the vaccines, that is often, it's a two-part conversation. Do you have like the logistical and financial network to be able to go, and can you physically get there? So yeah, I think that's a really critical to think about both of those pieces.
Yeah.
I'm just off the top of my head, not quite coming up with what that language would be. Tim, do you have any kind of half-baked thoughts of what you're thinking there?
Yeah, I would say neighbors, like namely, and putting that like neighbors without access to adequate healthcare facilities, comprehensive healthcare, or I'm thinking of like clinic opportunities too could be an important part of that, but like really just like without like access or opportunity to partake in comprehensive medical services and what that looks like.
And how that then feeds into how you can be engaged as a community member.
That's 100. Yeah, it means like if folks don't have, if we find out that there's a lot of people in our community that don't have comprehensive access to healthcare services, right? And we're hanging flyers in medical clinics, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? So like, I think informing it kind of on the back end that way could be important.
Or if we're saying, oh, for the people who don't have internet access at home, we'll come meet you in person, but those same people might not actually be comfortable meeting in person because of
they might not have access to vaccinate, right? Like all that kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And access to healthcare facilities feeds back into transportation. You have ways of getting there, but it also, and it's not just, medicine, it's also mental health.
Yeah.
Could we put the groups back up on the screen? I think center their conversation maybe around what specific.
Sorry, Naomi, put the group up instead of the notes.
Or just to look at that, I'm kind of flipping back to it a little bit. So I'm thinking of like the actual groups that we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. Because as the conversation's kind of going into a lot of really, really important subtleties of things that impact different groups, but I'm just thinking of
these groups.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was like, I wasn't sure. too many different terms. Yes, I'm happy to stay here and think about how to bring it back to this specific question, is that what you're getting at? How we can
Yeah.
fold this kind of this layer of health and pandemic uncertainty into these already hard to reach groups, and how we make sure that that's not an additional barrier that we're not considering. That what you're kind of getting at?
Well, I was thinking if the question that we're on right now is there a group that's missing from this list, right? Versus outreach strategies.
I have a question which may lead to a group that's missing. We have a lot of small residential care facilities, a number of them over around St. Elizabeth's, but there's the one that's down by the rec center. And where would people there fit into our groups?
That's a good question. Yeah, let me add care.
I thought people with disabilities in general, not necessarily one-to-one with that, but
yeah. But a great deal of those folks, there's some mental health issues as well.
I have one point, but it's not necessarily about a vulnerable group of folks who might not be able to engage with the things that we're doing. But I think reframing some of our language towards it, right? Like when we're talking about traditionally underrepresented groups, I think teasing out the idea of like historically excluded could be important to that too, right? Traditionally underrepresented and historically excluded is important to name in our neighborhood. I know that's like a structural thing. It's not a finite answer, but I think that could be important, right? When we're talking about groups of vulnerable people, it's not that those groups are hard to reach, right? It's that they're historically excluded. And so I think making sure that we're conscious about the ways that we're phrasing things like that too.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah, like
so this question is would you add or change the group list? And then what are your ideas for reaching these groups? So I think we've just, Tim, that's a really good point about how to frame it and the language we use to talk about these different groups. And then the group, like the residential care facility residents, people with disabilities, including mental health. Just getting to this second question a little bit, did any of you have ideas for reaching these groups?
I think in group settings, reaching out to the management of those facilities would be a pretty good way to try to engage those folks.
Yeah. Management of facilities. Yeah, and if they have any like other kinds of programming, I think we often find that a more successful model for this kind of abstract planning conversation can be folding it into other activities like Liz was talking about, showing up at Jazz in the Park. I think Jazz in the Park turns out more of a crowd than our meetings often do. So it's great to kind of piggyback on other things. So we could, I think, figuring out other resources that are going into these facilities, and if we can kind of join in on those events. All right, I'm going to go back to the groups just a little longer. And as we're looking at this, anything else popping to mind for anyone of populations that might be missing from this list? Yes, Tim.
Not a population, but throughout this entire list, I don't see anything about union work, like leveraging union representation and the ways in which folks might be unionized in our neighborhood too could be a good way. Like I know SEIU has a local chapter and stuff like that they work with a lot of folks who might work working class jobs and stuff. So I don't know where it fits necessarily, but I do think it might just be a good opportunity to collectively talk to a group of people.
Yeah.
I would add a caveat or something to that. Every time we suggest a way, the group we need to talk to, we also need to figure out who is trusted enough to make the pitch.
Mm.
And some of that's going to require some of us to step out and step up and be the people who start the conversations. Because Tim's going to have a whole different set of, either Tim is going to have a whole different set of connections in our communities or in our community than say I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great suggestion, Rebecca. I work in public health research, so I'm very familiar with the clinics, which are usually run by Denver Health. I work with university, but they partner a lot with Denver Health.
Mm-hmm.
So the clinics are a go-to space, but also the churches too. We have a lot of, in my neighborhood, we have 3 beautiful churches, Mount Carmel, St. Patrick's, and Guadalupe. And in the meeting I participated in before this, it's kind of joint between our group and Honey. That came up again, that we're not utilizing those connections and we have to reconnect with those particular institutions. So as far as health, public health, I would probably be a good person to make those initial contacts, because that's kind of the work I do anyway, because I work in community around public health. So, you know, I could kind of offer my connections for that effort anyway, moving forward.
That would be great. And yeah, Rebecca, I think that's a really good point. With all of this, I know when we're just like cold calling people, we're always very happy to have connections made by people who are, are trusted, and we all have too many emails in our inbox. So I think it just really helps to have that trusted connection, both the person and someone who understands the concerns and priorities of different groups is just going to be, they'll be able to be more sensitive to what's going to work for them. So great. All right. Well, let's move on to the next question. Would you add or change the special considerations included in the engagement strategy? So Edson, if I scroll past it, stop me. The additional considerations here. So I'm just going to leave this here so we can all take a minute to read it and refresh ourselves. And then internet access. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, Highland is not coming up as one of the areas with lower internet access. So that might not need to be a focus strategy for this group. But I think, even if it's not in this this upper category as some are in the other neighborhoods, I think we can always borrow those strategies from the other area. But I think for this group, it'd be great to kind of focus in on, we've talked a little bit about the variety of religious communities and organizations, the lack of business organizations in most areas. And then, we have this, I think several of you are connected with Honey, and it's from the perspective of a Denver planner, that is definitely a unique circumstance in this plan area, that there are 4 R nodes. They align with the 4 neighborhoods that are part of it, and so for them are very active and connected. So any thoughts from this group on this category?
One that's left out is nonprofits.
Okay.
Which are not necessarily religious, and they're not business, but they're where we can, in some cases, get into some of the least people who are talking to some of the least represented people in our neighborhood. We really do have, resource-wise, we're the wealthiest neighborhood, not in terms of money, but in terms of what we've already got in the neighborhood to work with.
Yeah, the food bank is a great example, and we do have a representative. Must be in the Sunnyside meeting since they're on the other side of the line. these days, but
But
The
for most of
food
their
bank was
history,
what you
they
said?
were.
Sorry, Tim, I missed it. Were you saying the food bank?
yeah,
Yeah.
For most of its history, it was on 32nd. So there's a lot of people in Highland who think of it still as part of our neighborhood, even though they're across the street, across 38.
yeah. I would also just comment that anecdotally, I do know people in Highland who don't have internet access. So even if it's less than 24%, there are plenty of people that don't have access, and reaching out to them is a really difficult part of our world today.
Yes, that is very true. And as we were discussing in the full group, even more complicated right now. Well, I mean, I'm more than happy to, I didn't mean to say we can't talk about that. Just trying to kind of prioritize the conversation, but any ideas on that beyond what's already in the plan that we've talked about? Any kind of missing opportunities that you've thought of, if it sounds like that's something that you've been contemplating as well.
I think, oh, sorry.
I have no solutions to that.
Yeah, I don't have solutions. I just have another thing to add to this. That's all.
Okay.
Sorry. I think we're really missing schools. Like that's like schools, parent-teacher organizations, like parent-teacher associations, whatever it shows up at in school. But like alumni, so the North High School Alumni Association is pretty deep and they're pretty well funded too. So like they have a great network of working with people too. So like making sure, I just think like schools, like as a whole, are a really overlooked space here, especially because Northwest has some of the highest populations of younger schools, right? Like North High School has gone up in enrollment for the past 10 years, like, and that can't be said for a lot of other comprehensive high schools in the district. So I think that that means like leveraging the school capacity we have.
Yeah, and I know Edson has been working with Mike, our staff, on generally youth engagement. But yeah, I guess that there's not a lot of detail in that. We just have youth heal. So we have, and this is a little bit going back to the other question, the school-based engagement partnership with classes, youth ambassador program, YMCA recreation groups, religious youth groups, SEL-based program. So is there more specificity that you would want to add, Tim, into this piece of the school-based engagement?
I just think like when we're looking at like special circumstances, when we look at like the formulations of those groups, right, we're talking about collective groups of people like who organizationally operate in the same ways. And I think like sending a survey to all school leaderships in the near Northwest area, right, like is something that like comprehensively covers schools on the front end, right? That like principals and teachers can disseminate, and I think like doesn't necessarily work within like the group or like affinity space setting, but I think like actually using the school infrastructure could be beneficial.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
Highland United Neighbors has an education committee that has worked really heavily, especially with North over the years.
Well, and our elementary schools are mostly bilingual at this point in the neighborhood. And that gives us connections to folks who may not be native English speakers or are bilingual themselves. It gives us access to more people from the neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods as well.
We have 3 elementary schools within our boundaries.
Yep.
Great. Okay, I want to move us along just because I have not been good at managing our time. I apologize. I think we're going back in 4 minutes. So our next 2 questions are, what can you do as a steering committee member to help with engagement? Are there specific people groups you know who could serve as community connectors? And then the next 2 questions are very different. So I think we've talked about this a little bit. Lorenzo, you mentioned the public health I'm just going to put that back in here again.
Sure.
Tim, you mentioned or Tim Hernandez, you mentioned the unions were one that came up. I don't know if you have any connections there.
Yeah, I'm yes, I'm very connected in the union.
From members. So
I'd like to also add, going back to health, I think, some structure that's already been kind of built in the community over the years they're community health workers. We call them promotoras because they do it in English and Spanish, but they work directly with a lot of the neighbors and in neighborhoods. So I think connecting with the promotora programs or projects in the neighborhood would be a wonderful thing to do.
Last week, I met with the Honey Board and we did a visioning on what Honey can do to help with this. They're very excited. I sent Liz a report on what we talked about, including names and contacts for people who have said they will help reach out into the community. So it doesn't just have to be us. We've got a particularly rich group of allies within Honey.
yeah, and Liz sent me that. I have it pulled up here. So thank you for your thorough notes from that brainstorming. And yeah, so much of this is just human time. And so having a list of people who are looped into conversation and ready to put in some hours to just reach out, and that's really helpful. So thank you. I think we've touched on some stuff here. And I think this will be an ongoing conversation. So I just want to pop down to what, if we did a tour of the neighborhood, what stops and topics would be important. Since we're going to be booted back in a moment, just throw out any ideas. Don't wait, unmute yourself and go for it. I'm just going to type as fast as I can.
I think looking at Lower Highland, where we've got dramatic contrast between new houses, new duplexes, and the historic houses that have been affordable in the past would be a great part of the tour.
That's a great one.
I think we need stops that will help us know who we were, as well as who we are and who we want to be.
Well said.
There used to be an arts tour. I don't know if a lot of the artists are still in the neighborhood. As far as I know, there are quite a few of us. So an arts tour of those of us who are in the creative genre.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Lucha Martinez and Manny Martinez with the Colorado Chicano Murals Project have really good neighborhood tours already set up for Chicano murals in Denver, which could be a great way to leverage the network that they already have set up.
And I've done a number of history tours of the neighborhood over time, and I'd be willing to add some of that element.
Thank you.
Great. All right, I thought we were going to be automatically booted back at 7:05.
We got 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh, okay. Thank you, guys. I can't because I'm sharing my screen. I miss all these notifications. Okay, so yeah, these are some great great ideas. Just trying to think any other. Oh yeah, we have 116 seconds. I now see.
Oh, is it one more question? Or is that the last one?
That was the last one. So I think as we're just sitting here, if anything pops up into mind, both in terms of how steering committees can help, specific groups you guys are connected to and would be willing to reach out to, or people, I know Liz talked about the community navigators, and we're still, there's still openings for that. So both generally like who you would reach out to, but also if you know people who you think would be a good fit for that, that would be really, really great. And any other places or themes in terms of a tour.
Gardens at St. Elizabeth. Sorry, I was saying the Gardens at St. Elizabeth.
The director of the gardens at St. Elizabeth is on the Honey board too.
Great. Any other thoughts on that? And I can also pull up the map. I'm a map person. Sometimes when I'm thinking about a place, I like can't even picture it until I have to look at a map, and then I'm like, oh yeah, all those places.
I will just say maybe looking at some of the businesses.
Some of the businesses.
Sorry.
Any in particular?
Well, there's some restaurants that have been around for a while. Point out that occasionally they've been able to make it through all these years.
Community gardens, we still have quite a few
Yes.
community gardens.
But just some of the general thoughts of what you heard during our breakout group from the group. And I can scroll through if you need to see anything. But Shayla, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so we came up with a lot of things for the first question. We mostly focused on building trust, ensuring that we're outreaching to low-income minorities and people that aren't being heard. So yeah, building trust is difficult, especially since we're trying to help and heal old wounds. We also talked about just making sure we have action steps, that we're not just saying that we're going to do something. And then also we did talk about just modifying the old wounds sentence into something else, since it might trigger some people. And then for the second question, we talked about reaching the Hispanic Latinx residents by going to 2 nightclubs. So maybe if we pass out flyers or if we leave flyers there. Also, we talked about navigators. So having these navigators go to these group of people and engaging like at nightclubs. Maybe we were talking about Save a Lot if they go there. And then just other local businesses such as Nesios, 2 Birds, 1 Stone, and just making connections there with people that we can't reach out to. And then for the last question, we went ahead and talked about churches, businesses, nonprofits, making phone calls, especially right now during COVID, that we may not be able to reach people. And then through DPS, so community engagement. And then lastly, we weren't able to answer the what can you do as a steering committee member. But for the last one, we came up with important places we would cover on a tour would be Sunnyside, so the projects, Quig Newton, any like local businesses that have been here around for a long time. So Lechugas, Chubby's, parks, areas where zoning is different than existing land use. So high traffic conflict areas, bus stops, businesses at risk. And then we talked about apartment buildings where we could go ahead and do a tour there. And then community gardens and playgrounds is what we covered.
Thank you. Did anybody else from the group want to chime in with everything? Should cover it? Okay, so let's go to, I think this was combined. So how about Highland?
Tim Hernandez is generous enough to volunteer for our for Highland.
What's good, everybody? How's everybody doing? We're hanging in there. Man, I tell you what, bro. I'm like definitely like I feel it very hard to turn off my teacher energy sometimes. So I'm gonna rattle through this. All right, I'll try to keep my jokes to a minimum. But big things that we talked about on that first one, you'll see we really didn't have much of a discussion because we really did agree with the goals. we just kind of affirmed that making the outreach as broad as possible is really important, which kind of expanded to our second conversation about expanding the language around underrepresented groups and what that looks like, making our language accessible, right? That historically marginalized people are not historically underrepresented, that they're historically excluded, and being cognizant about what that means and teasing out some of those details. We had some awesome folks share about residential care facilities. We had people talking about what do we do with folks who have disabilities, including mental health. We also had a conversation about working through like union structures, school structures, identifying groups and trusting the connection to each people in the group. So that way we can leverage like proximity, right? To space, proximity to systems, and proximity to people. We also had a conversation about what do we do for folks that may not have access to adequate health insurance and healthcare facilities, right? So we're talking about, we're gonna go on a door knocking campaign and somebody might not be vaccinated and might not feel comfortable with that, right? Like, how do we be cognizant of those realities, especially in our neighborhoods as well? Lorenzo was talking about how he has awesome connections to clinics and really how clinics are a good space, and also how churches are an awesome space because churches, you know, kind of facilitate a neutrality between so many people. So that goes to the third section when we were talking about what would you add or change to the special considerations, which again, we kind of tore up that question, so sorry. But we did jump in and we talked about how nonprofits are not represented. So, I mean, the first one that came to mind was like Servicio de la Raza, leveraging spaces like that as well, especially because they do community work. Using the food bank as an example about how a lot of people think that like about how Highland is a part of the neighborhood since it used to be located in Highland, right? Like about teasing out those differences and then understanding how the food bank is a great system to leverage in there as well. Talked about even if there's not a large population, right? Jefferson Park, Chapsy Park might have more folks with limited internet access. There are people in Highland who still struggle for internet access. And then I brought up talking about the North High School Alumni Association using the DPS structure, right? Making sure that we're leveraging school leadership teams, parent-teacher associations to not only cover youth engagement, but also making sure that we're reaching vulnerable populations, right? Folks who might not, you know, that check multiple boxes on those historically excluded groups are all going to have kids that go to school. So making sure that we talk about that. The last part, we talked about leveraging personal connections, really making sure that you know, teasing out who does what, you feel me? Like if we're talking about like the racy metrics, right? Like let's actually assign something. And so Lorenzo was talking about his connection to public health. I'm obviously connected with the school and I'm also a member of the union as a teacher. Rebecca was talking about HUNI members who are willing to work, Highland Unified Neighborhood. I forget the name. I'm so sorry, Rebecca, no disrespect. So yeah, and then the final thing, which is which stops would be important to cover. We kind of went all over the place, but we talked about like Lower Highland and the dramatic contrast between new construction and historic houses that have been there, talking about affordable housing there. We also talked about the necessity to cover the arts in the Near Northwest Area Plan. I work with Lucha Martinez and Manny Martinez designing Chicano mural curriculum at North to talk about our Chicano history through murals that are already in our neighborhood. They already have tours set up. So leveraging that space to talk about our history and talk about the presence that's there as well. Rebecca's done history tours talking about how she can get in there, doing gardens like the Jose Sanchez one right on 38th across from Illegal Pete's, right? There's one at North, using spaces like that. And then finally going into businesses, restaurants, like Lechugas and everybody that's been talking about that as well. So yeah.
Thank you. And you can bring your teacher energy anytime. We need that.
I'm gonna do what I can, bro. I'm gonna do what I can. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'm tired, so I'm gonna turn my camera off and eat some dinner. I'll talk to y'all in a minute.
Thanks. Okay, so let's get to our last group, Jefferson Park. Or were you guys combined as well?
No one came to our
okay.
group, so it was just us, and I think either Leslie or Ashton were gonna tag team on this one.
Ashton, thank you for volunteering.
Well, did Garrett not make it over? Sorry, Garrett, if that's we were trying to
Garrett was there. Garrett was there.
He's doing this. He can chime in as well. We're a small but mighty group. So I think we took a little bit of a different approach on some of these questions, but in terms of the goals, generally speaking, we agree with them. We all said that they are certainly lofty goals, and we're not certain we're going to truly put a check mark next to all 4 of them, but we're willing to do whatever we can do to help achieve all 4 of those goals the best we can. Obviously, reaching underrepresented groups we think is going to be the toughest part of those goals. In terms of what to add or change, we think it's pretty well covered. The one group that we did discuss specifically with Jefferson Park that may not necessarily fit in to those groups that are already on the list is young professionals. You know, they're not really youth. Most of them are renters, but not necessarily all of them. So that was really the only other group that we thought about perhaps could be added, the young professional group. Moving on pretty quick, in terms of areas to engage the community and for reaching out. We talked about some very specific places around Jefferson Park, the car wash at 23rd and Federal, which is an incredible place to meet and greet a lot in the Latin community, especially on weekends. Saturday morning, Sunday morning, that place is packed. We talked about the veteran apartments that are on Federal. We also talked a lot about how even though Sloan's Lake is not part of the near Northwest area plan, a lot of the people that live directly across from Jefferson Park on the other side of Federal that are technically in Sloan's Lake, a lot of those people, I think, do connect with our neighborhood. And there are a lot of places along the Federal corridor on the other side that we think would be great places to reach out, including a couple of group living homes that are on that side. We also talked about the large apartment buildings that are all across Jefferson Park and the new ones that are going to be coming online here probably before this plan is done. I don't know, Leslie, you can jump in here anytime that you'd like to. Again, we took a little bit of a different approach and had a lot of sidebar conversations and didn't get quite as much on these lists as the other neighborhoods. We talked about the Family Star Montessori, which is one of the biggest in the state of Colorado in terms of Montessori schools. The Safeway, which is actually the 6th busiest in the state, if you didn't know that. Riverside Church and Little Explorers Preschool, which is part of Riverside, and that program continues to grow. We have CEC, of course, here in Jefferson Park. They have a preschool. Leslie, you want to take over from here?
Sure. Ashton, you've done a great job. Thank you. We also talked about the big hotel complex that is at, well, I don't know the exact address, Zunai and 26.
Spear and Zunai. Spear and Zunai. Yes.
Thank you. Spear and Zunai. It's a huge yellow hotel complex that has that is housing people in various stages of transition, people experiencing homelessness. And that would be a great place to maybe reach out to underserved folks. As Ashton mentioned, we've got a lot of group living and underserved folks. They're on the western side of Federal, but they still have Federal Boulevard addresses. And so they will be very, very much impacted by this plan. And that includes, as Ashton said, the Del Norte Veterans Apartments at 26th and Federal, the Salvation Army's Lambeth Family Center at 27th and Federal, and then we have a group living home whose name I don't know at 24th and Federal. So even though the boundary of the plan goes straight down Federal, these are people who are just maybe 20 feet away in large communities. And that Del Norte Veterans Apartment does have a community room that we are allowed to access and use if we'd like to.
Those are great suggestions. And I think we recognize, I think you asked this question in the very first meeting, that like there's both sides of Federal, and we're not expecting that we would just completely ignore the other side through this process. So these are great suggestions. So I think we got through all the groups, so I'll stop sharing this screen now. Thank you all for this good discussion around this. I think we will be reaching out. I love Tim's idea of the to-do list. So we'll put your name and see what you're volunteering to do on engagement over the next couple of months. And we'll look through the comments on the engagement strategy and start working on some edits to those to share with you all. But if anything else sparked your mind or you didn't get a chance to share on it, we welcome emails to us after this meeting with any additional ideas. I'm going to let us have a 5-minute break now, and we're going to come back and give some time to our transportation and infrastructure colleagues for the next part of the agenda. So if everyone could come back at, let's see, 7:26, we'll get started on that. Okay, I think everybody's joining back. Thank you for being timely. Always packing too much into these agendas. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we want to spend a little time at our upcoming meetings talking through some of our other plans that we have in the city or ongoing projects that would relate back to what we're working on in near Northwest. So we'll be inviting various departments to participate. And for tonight, we have the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and they have a lot going on, both in near Northwest and just in the city in general. So we have, I believe can everybody see the PowerPoint again? And many of you, I think, are familiar with a number of these projects or serve on other committees that are informing some of these. But I'll invite up our colleagues, and just for some quick background, just remember again, we're sort of at the beginning of this process. Here's our timeline, and we're in this understanding the area phase. And part of that is understanding, what other policy documents we have in the city and other projects that are going on in the area. So that's kind of what we wanted to devote some time to. And this is the graphic we showed in our first meeting that talks through, we have citywide goals and vision that come from our comprehensive plan, and then we have a number of citywide plans. So we'll touch on some of these Denver Moves plans, which are our transportation plans in this part of the presentation. So with that, I think I'm passing it over to Evan. Is that correct? Or if you all wanted to just introduce yourselves from our transportation team, that would be great.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Geneva Houghton, and I am a senior city planner on the transportation and infrastructure side. I'm going to be talking through the Northwest Community Transportation Network. And from our department, I have several other colleagues. So if you would like to unmute yourselves and introduce.
Thanks, Geneva. I'm Walter Scheib. I'm an associate city planner with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure.
Hey everybody, I'm Paige Colton. I help plan bike and pedestrian projects with Dottie.
Hi everyone, this is Myla. I'm a transit planner, and I'll be talking about Denver Moves Federal, which is a transit alternatives analysis.
And this is Evan Anderson representing Dottie as part of the Denver Moves Strategic Transportation Plan team.
Thank you, Evan. And I think we can just kick it off to you to take it from here.
Absolutely. Great to be a part of this group. Great to see so many engaged voices and such a great neighborhood and area, and really good to kind of see where you are in the process for really understanding the area and context, because that's very much where we are in Denver Moves Everyone 2050, which is really the city's citywide strategic transportation plan. This is really kind of tying together all of the work across the city, our neighborhoods, some of the modal plans that you're going to hear a little bit more about from some of the Dottie colleagues on the line, and bringing it together to really shape a shared vision for the future of transportation in Denver. And then really kind of tying that vision and goals to a data-driven, stakeholder-informed, performance-based planning process so that we can really start to dial in the investments that we need to make to transform Denver's transportation system. So this plan will kind of rest above many of the other cooperative efforts that are going on, and really kind of focus again on that system level, long-term horizon, performance-driven planning process, with the kind of end result of really developing a capital improvement program that will guide the exact investments we would like to make across the city over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So it's a much higher level efforts, but really kind of, again, pivoting off a lot of the great work that's being done in these kind of efforts. Next slide. The overall course of the effort will run through the fall of next year. We're kind of organizing it in 4 major phases. We're kind of towards the end of the setting the foundation phase right now, which is really kind of linking everything that we're doing to resident and community values, so that we're building this performance-based planning process and framework directly from the values and what you care about and what you expect from the transportation system. We'll be kind of wrapping up this initial phase with the state of the system report coming out in the fall, which will really kind of identify a lot of our challenges, issues, opportunities, and some of those kind of data, again, to kind of help explore some of those citywide issues that we're all collectively facing. We'll kind of move into the fall and winter and really kind of look at finding the path forward, doing a lot of exploratory modeling and analysis using new tools that the department is investing in, and kind of really exploring a range of alternative futures for Denver. So that we can be prepared regardless of how the future turns out, and really kind of understand what some of the most impactful policies, programs, and projects might be, and really kind of helping us meet those critical goals that this plan will set. What are those policies that will really help us shift people onto alternative modes to make our communities stronger, to address safety concerns, all those kind of broad goals. We really want to do as much data analysis and exploratory modeling as we can. From there, we'll kind of move in and take some of that input and kind of develop, as we suggested, that capital improvement program, kind of conduct a data-driven prioritization so that we can take all the great projects that are being identified by the entire Dottie team, kind of roll those together and really look at their potential outputs or outcomes. And then again, kind of start programming, funding, financing those projects again to actually make forward progress. Then we'll kind of close out with a series of reporting and communications tools, kind of making sure that, again, we're adopting a real data-driven, performance-based approach at the agency, really kind of communicating back to stakeholders the implementation of this plan overall. At each of these phases, there's going to be lots of opportunities for you all to get involved. Again, we kind of started off with a great little values visioning exercise. There's a current tool available now at www.denvermoveseveryone.com. You can kind of take a peek at that, tell us a little bit about what you think of our goals, help us frame up some of the things we ought to be focusing on. At each interval and each phase kind of moving forward, we'll have another tool available, that denvermoveseveryone.com website. We'll have pop-up events. We'll be coordinating with groups across the city and across CPD and MPI. And you can always just kind of reach out anytime with the email address there, info@denvermoveseveryone.com. Do want to kind of bring people's attention on the next slide to a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about this plan. If you're up for a whole nother evening of learning about transportation in Denver, we do have a public virtual meeting tomorrow from 5 to 6:30 p.m. And we'll go ahead and drop that link into the chat as well as the overall website. You can find more information there. So just another great opportunity. And again, there'll be many more to be involved, and we'll certainly make sure that these groups are connected. And finally, similar to what we just kind of walked through with the planning context and coordination, really kind of important to understand where this plan sits overall so that it's not just another transportation plan. But the last time the department really had a strategic transportation plan was 2008. And I think we can all agree a lot has changed since then. So this is really an opportunity to create an umbrella plan, unify our vision goals, look at our priority projects across our community, modal, network, operational and system plans, and really kind of bring forth, again, those priority investments, those policies that are going to make the biggest bang for our buck, and really kind of continue to drive performance and progress on our overall vision. And that's kind of how something like Denver Moves Transit and Denver Moves Bicycle, which I think you're going to hear a little bit more about this evening, kind of fit within the Denver Moves Everyone framework. And that's it.
Great, thanks, Evan. And I can take it from here. So we're kind of tonight going to talk through, as Evan described, a citywide plan that's talking the next 20, 30 years of transportation. And then we're going to go down from really broad to a little bit more specific. So I know some of you really well from our work over the last year and a half or so. So thank you. And I'm really happy to see some familiar faces tonight. So I have been working on the Northwest Community Transportation Network, which is really looking at how can we build out communities and networks of bikeways to get people safely across the city. Next slide, please, Liz. And I'm not going to bore you too much with all of these plans. It's just to say that we have a lot of citywide plans, and we are making sure that the recommendations from these planning efforts, whether it's one focusing on biking, walking, safety, the Vision Zero Action Plan, or transit, that we are pulling all of these recommendations together and forward, and then we're going to tweak and augment and go through those over the next year and a half or so as we are working together with community planning and development and you all out of developing some new recommendations. Next slide, please. Again, a bunch of different plans that fit together. Next slide. So what are community transportation networks? If this is the first time that you're hearing about them, we are working in 3 different large areas of the city to build out better networks of multimodal infrastructure. So that just means that we want it to be easier for people to walk and bike and take transit and potentially leave their car at home for a trip of the day, or if they don't have a car, that people can just get around as easily as possible. So we're focusing on Northwest, Central, and South Central of the city, and you can see that that's a pretty big area. And so within that, we've been working really closely with neighbors and neighborhoods in our council district and others, saying, okay, let's bring some lines on the map that came from a plan 10 years ago, and let's give that a little bit more breadth. And let's collect some data, bring that to concept design, pull it through to final design, and really focus on implementing. And our goal in implementing things quickly is that we know that it's unrealistic to ask for people to change how they are moving without providing them a really easy way to get around. So that's why we've been focusing first on bike infrastructure. Next slide. And the purpose of this is always to improve safety. It's our goal to eliminate all serious injuries and fatalities on Denver streets by 2030. We're also trying to create a healthier, more sustainable, and economically strong city. We want to get people where they want to go. Hopefully that means that someone is, again, leaving a car at home and taking their bike or walking or transit or scooters, some interesting combination of all of those things. We want to just provide more travel options, understanding that we have more Denverites, we have more people here, more visitors, and we need better ways of getting people around. Next slide, please. And so over the past year and a half, not ironically, but ironically, at the very start of the pandemic, I think we had one in-person stakeholder meeting in February 2020. So we've been working to try to be strategic and creative in how we're reaching folks. So actually in the top right-hand corner, it's a little glimpse of a map that we were using, similar to what was used here, to get some of that detailed feedback. And we've also provided that to this team. So all of those good pieces of this intersection is hard, or this street is where I would really like it to be safer. All of that is getting wrapped into this work again. So we've had open houses, we've been working with our stakeholder working group, we've had input maps, project surveys, lots and lots of interesting ways to get feedback on the designs, office hours, hotlines, all of that good stuff. And all of that input has really helped shape the designs. Next slide, please. And also we heard some very clear themes throughout our time. We heard about speeding and safety. We heard that people wanted safer ways to cross streets, particularly some of our arterials. Federal, of course, came to mind and came up quite a lot, Zuni, 26th. People want easier ways to get around. Of course, want a better and more improved connection across the city and across Northwest Denver. We heard concerns about parking removal. We heard a lot about wanting better visibility at the intersection and a lot about pedestrian connectivity. So not only sidewalks, but also saying, hey, I can't even cross the street very easily. So we took all of that information, and again, we're really focusing on bikeways, and often those bikeways are improving pedestrian infrastructure as well. So I've been talking a lot, and I want to show you kind of what this means. So in 2020, the city installed 2 bikeways in Northwest Denver. One was West 35th Avenue neighborhood bikeway, and the other was a bike lane on West 50th. And I know that's outside of the realm of what we're focusing on tonight, but it is pertinent to our project. So you can see on this map that you don't have a bike network, and those gray lines are showing where there's maybe an existing shared lane, but it's not a connected area, and it's not a connected way to get around. So it's pretty hard to ask people to start changing their behavior and even enticing them to pick up a bike or to bike with their kids if this is what we're providing. So our goal is really to build out a network. Next slide. And this year we have the opportunity of installing some of the projects. So that includes West 46th. Just a few final things need to be done. North Zuni is going in, a short section of Lipan and West 44th. The West 23rd and water protected bike lane are also going in this year. So we're starting to fill out that network, particularly in the north. And then by the end of 2023, all of those other colored lines on the map are going to get built. Next slide, please. So we know that we have 2 corridors that need a little bit more work, including North Tejon, which is in this district. You can see all of those other solid lines are lines that we have been working on, and those are projects that we are building. And I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about Elliott and Clay and 41st and creating this network for folks to get around and to connect North High School and to connect Jefferson Park. And so all of this, I think, is really exciting. And this is what we've been working on. Next slide, please. And the majority of those corridors, so Elliott, Clay, 41st, are neighborhood bikeways. And the kind of neighborhood bikeway that you've seen and currently see on West 35th is a little bit different than what we're working on. And the reason for that is we know more now. We have more experience, we have more data, and we have more, and I would say better ways of really control traffic. And so the intention of these streets is to prioritize people who are walking and biking by either cutting out some of the traffic, by using soft diversion. So it might be just kind of annoying to drive on that street, and so you might choose a different route. We're trying to slow vehicular speeds. We're really trying to prioritize people walking at the intersections, and we're trying to give priority to people biking. So these are intended as really multimodal shared streets that are enjoyable for people to be on. We're really excited about these, particularly, as I mentioned, Elliott, Clay, and 41st. So those are going to start and really start connecting the city in a new way. Next slide. And so, as I mentioned, we have 2 really short segments that are coming in this summer, fall. Everything is a little bit flux when it comes to construction schedules. We're anticipating over the next month or so that North Zuni will go in, and we have a couple of blocks of a neighborhood bikeway segment, West 44th from Lipan to Inca, and then the bigger projects are going to go to construction next year. So kind of as we are all working together and thinking about the future for mobility in Northwest Denver and in the neighborhoods that we're working on together, I'm excited for people to start seeing some of these improvements and to start thinking differently about what does the future look like and where can we really make some improvements and what can be memorialized and documented in this planning effort to then move forward in the future to a real project and real changes on the street. Next slide. And the last corridor that I'm going to briefly touch on is the North Tejon corridor. You've probably heard about this project. We were working with a recommendation from about 10 years ago to create a protected bike lane. And this is the cross section of what that would look like. You would have travel lanes, a buffer area with a vertical protection, and a dedicated bike lane. And there were some really serious trade-offs to this, including full parking removal throughout the corridor. We heard a lot from the community, we heard a lot from business owners. And so because of that, we are taking a deeper dive on this corridor, understanding that there's still a need to bring people north and south from Low-High up to Sunnyside, and maybe that there is a better way to do that. Next slide, please. So for those who've been pretty plugged into this project, I know that we keep saying that we're going to come back out and be working on this, and I promise you we are. We hope to really start the kind of replanning process for this later this fall, and that's going to be looking at Tejon and Cuevas and Shoshone. And perhaps one of those alternative routes, we can use a different kind of treatment because the street itself is quite different. So I just wanted to touch on that because I'm sure that there are questions. Just know that we're going to continue to work on that, and I will make sure that we are keeping you all engaged in that process. And so with that, I will hand it off to my colleague. And I think that we are handing this to Paige or maybe to Mai. Yes, okay. Thank you so much. And please let me know if you have any questions. And I am really excited for you to hear about this next project.
Yep, I think that's me. Thanks for the handoff, Geneva. So hi, everyone. My name is Marilo, transportation planner with Dottie's transit planning team. And I'm here to talk about Denver Moose Federal, a transit alternatives analysis that delves into a variety of possible transit options for the corridor. Some of you have served on this project's community advisory team, so this may be a bit of a repeat, but I'll be sharing some recent updates at the end. Next slide, please. For this project, we defined the study area into two parts. Capital improvements like bus lanes and stops were only analyzed within the city boundary since we don't have control over what happens outside. But we felt it was important to look at how the corridor works within a larger system outside of our city. So potential operational improvements like creating seamless connections and minimizing how long it takes for a bus to come were analyzed as well, with RTD as our partner in this. Next slide. And this is an overview of the project milestones to date. We kicked off in late 2019, held community advisory team meetings, technical meetings, sent out surveys, and hosted online meetings throughout the major steps in the process, from concept evaluation to creating recommendations. We just have one milestone left, which is to release the final report that documents the entire process and includes recommendations and concept design drawings. Next slide. Some of the stakeholder feedback we heard was that bus rapid transit, or BRT, was the #1 transit option for federal, and making it safe and multimodal friendly was key. Next slide. And these were the range of transit options that were suggested by stakeholders and analyzed during our level 1 screening. Everything from enhanced bus to light rail was analyzed, and we were also required to analyze alternative corridors parallel to federal to make sure that federal was the right choice. And the analysis found that yes, federal is the right choice due to many factors, and narrowed the options down to bus-focused ones due to constraints such as right-of-way and funding. Next slide, please. And the final 3 options were center running BRT, which you see right before you, where bus-only lanes and waiting platforms would be in the center of the road. And the next slide would show side running BRT, where lanes and stops would be on each side of the road. And the final option on the next slide would be enhanced transit, which was the most cost-friendly option that would focus on things like transit priority signalization and enhanced bus stops. And next slide, please.
I don't know if anyone else is seeing this, but I'm not seeing slides. Sorry if I'm the only one.
Is everyone else seeing them?
Yeah, I can see them.
I'm seeing slides.
Sorry, Naomi.
All right, it is just me then.
We'll make sure. We'll make sure everybody gets a copy of this afterwards as well.
No,
Sorry
no problem.
about that.
I'm the least critical person in this group. I just wanted to make sure that it was.
No, thank you for checking.
We'll make sure that the presentation is released after the meeting. Anyway, so some of the things we saw from the level 2 step of the evaluation process was that there's a strong case for BRT and high capacity transit that would have a positive impact to both local and regional mobility, and that no single option would work across the entire corridor due to constraints. So next slide. And based on that, our recommendations are to implement side running BRT south of 20th Avenue down to the southern city boundary and implement enhanced transit north of 20th. And this configuration would maintain 2 lanes in each direction for general traffic for the whole corridor while still advancing the vision for BRT. So it was, our final recommendation was a bit of a balancing act, as you can see. Next slide. And our next steps will be to release the final report, coordinate with the speed and reliability transit improvement project happening on federal very soon, so that any improvements made for that project don't preclude BRT, and looking to secure federal funds for the next phase of this project, which would be creating detailed engineering design drawings and completing environmental clearance. I should note that this BRT vision for federal is a long-term project due to the need for federal funds. It's estimated that the next phase would be a few years from now as we go through the process for funding approval. And next slide, that is it from me. That's my contact information if you have any questions. I know that was a really fast presentation. I was only given 3.5 minutes, so I wanted to be very quick and concise. But please, feel free to email me if you have any questions.
And Maya, so we can make sure that the committee gets the report once that is out,
Yes.
and then we'll have future discussions dedicated towards more on transportation in general, so we can bring you back for that too.
For sure.
Okay, one more project, right? And yours, I think are you gonna share? Paige?
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Sharing.
Okay, can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, awesome. Everybody, Paige Colton here again, planner with Department of Transportation Infrastructure. Just here to talk through briefly a project that is a little bit shorter term than the project we just heard about along Federal Boulevard. It's called the Federal Boulevard Pedestrian Improvement Project. And really the intent is to improve conditions for people walking along Federal Boulevard between 23rd Ave and 27th Ave. So we have a lot of different partners we're working with, including the Federal Boulevard Business Improvement District in that area, and also the Jefferson Park United Neighbors, or JPUN. And this is a Elevate Denver bond project. So it has a dedicated source of funding to plan, design, and build the project. We also have some state funding from a grant called the Safer Main Streets Grant. So we're really excited about all the money that we have and just the opportunity to improve things in this area. So right now we are in conceptual design, which means now's the time to get a lot of feedback from you all who live in the community and anyone who works, lives, plays kind of in this area of Federal Boulevard. Just for a little bit of context, here's the project here. Here's I-25, this is Federal Boulevard, here's Sloan's Lake, here's Mile High Stadium. So just for a little bit of context. We have this online public meeting that you can walk through by yourself and read more about the project, answer some questions for us. I'm just going to walk through it really briefly, but would definitely encourage you to visit this website and pass it along to friends, family, constituents, anyone who might be interested. The website is federalpedimprovements.com. So we use a pretty logical name there to get you to this website. I think Liz will pass out more information about this via email afterwards as well. So just real briefly, what we heard in late 2019, early 2020 is that it's really hard to cross the street. It doesn't feel safe for people. There isn't really a consistent sense of placemaking or aesthetics along the corridor, especially in kind of the business district. Cars move really fast and it's very uncomfortable to walk along Federal Boulevard. Bus stops are far from the intersection and don't have a ton of amenities. They don't necessarily have shade or kind of feel safe or comfortable to wait at. And then there's also traffic queuing and delays at signals. So where we are now is conceptual design for 4 intersections along the corridor. So 23rd, 24th, 25th, and 26th. We have these little diagrams that you can hover over different elements and read about what we're proposing. And then we have some questions as well. We also have a 25th Ave design. So 25th Ave between Federal Boulevard and Elliott Street is kind of the center of the business district in the area. So we have some special plans for that street. Our design concept essentially involves turning it into a shared street. So the intent is to have no curbs on the street, have people walking, biking, and driving all share the street. So really slow cars down, add different elements in like trees and landscaping, space for people to hang out, make it really easy to close down for events, and then also improve how you get to this area across Federal Boulevard with the signal, and then also add a raised crosswalk at Elliott in 25th to really make it a space for people walking and not people driving. It will also maintain most of the parking that already exists, so we can kind of have a balance of people who drive and really improve things for people walking. So that's the vision for 25th. We do have a quick survey, more survey questions about kind of the design and placemaking elements that people want to see in the area. So definitely encourage you to scroll through these and choose your favorites. And then in terms of project timeline, so right now we're in preliminary design. We're hoping to wrap up design by next year, August, and then plan to construct in 2023, 2024. So, it feels like kind of far away, but I think for my department, this feels like we're moving pretty fast, and we have the money to do this. So really want to hear your feedback. Again, Liz will pass out more information about this project for me. So yeah, let us know if you have any questions. Definitely go to this website, and thanks so much. Okay, I was gonna unshare my screen. Maybe you should just take back control, Liz, if you need to.
You're muted, Liz.
Okay, you can hear me now? You're not seeing a big version of me from Paige's screen. Okay, so we're right at 7:58. So I know that took up quite a bit of time. If there's like one or two questions, maybe we could cover that. Otherwise, I'll send additional information on these projects after our meeting, and you can feel free to reach out to me and I'll get the questions along, or we'll make sure that you have the contact information for the various project managers. But again, we're just trying to broaden your awareness of projects that are going on and kind of thinking about the types of things we might be making recommendations for in the future. Leslie, you want to do a plug for your federal Boulevard one?
Yeah, well, like Paige said, this is moving really fast and we're really excited. A lot of the upgrades that you see are things that we've been advocating for since the federal Boulevard corridor study of 2 or 3 years ago. I've kind of lost track. But we're really hoping, as Paige said, to just make it safer to cross federal, moving some bus stops, changing lights and how pedestrians can cross the street. And then hopefully we can also possibly get CDOT to reduce the speed going through that area, because we have so many people on foot going. I saw the way you smiled, Liz. We have so many people going to school, going to Safeway, going to the veterans apartments, going, to the Lambeth Center. Many people are on foot. So I know it's a pie in the sky kind of wish, but my wish is that through this area, we will get CDOT to reduce the speed of cars traveling through for everyone's safety.
Thank you for that plug. Okay, so we're at 7:59. So just in terms of next steps, thank you everybody for the good discussion tonight. I'll reach back out with this information on these various transportation projects, but also to follow up on some of the in-person, the tours that we discussed, more guidance on in terms of vaccine requirements related to that. So be on the lookout for just probably some surveying and then some additional information. And then calling on each of you to help with some of our engagement going forward. So with that, I don't want to keep anybody over time. Appreciate your time this evening, and I hope everybody has a good night. See you all soon.
Wait, before you go,
yeah.
The federal Boulevard bid. The federal Boulevard bid wants to buy each of the stakeholder group folks a ticket to the Fun on Federal event. Sorry,
Federal, and that's,
sorry about my dog.
Oh, that's great. So that's September 19th. Is that the right date? Okay, we'll get more details from you, Leslie. Thank you. Okay, see you all soon.